It's kind of important to have those. I'm going to skip down just a little bit here talking about leadership. When we're thinking about developing players, character development is important. And a lot of times what that does is when you have players that have good character and, like you mentioned, you knew early on in your playing career that you wanted to be a coach. And part of that was because you wanted to help develop players. And there's probably other players you've coached that have felt the same way. So thinking about players that maybe are emerging into leadership roles, maybe it's a freshman that played for, freshman, sophomore year, and they're kind of stepping into a role that formerly was held by a junior or senior when they get a little bit older. How do you kind of coach players into those roles and help them understand not only that it's important to win, but also the character development, how you work with your teammates? You talked about being a good teammate earlier. And that's one of the most important things in being a leader is, doing the things that you're expecting others to do, being the first one out there to do it. How do you coach that? There's a lot of different probably theories out there on how that's done, but from your experience as a coach, players that are kind of up and coming leaders that you can kind of tell, how do you coach them in that?
Well, the first thing is you have to be intentional about it. It's not just going to happen. And I hear a lot of times like, hey, we don't have good senior leadership. Well, just because you were a freshman and then a sophomore and then a junior and now you're a senior doesn't mean you're a leader.
Automatic,
It doesn't matter, And I remember my freshman year at St. Louis University. I remember at the end of the fall, I'd had a really good fall, and it looked like I was going to be one of the starting pitchers. And I remember my coach talking to me as a freshman and saying, we need you to be one of our leaders. And that just kind of blew my mind at the time because I wasn't thinking about being a leader on a team where I was a freshman and, we had all these great players on the team and things of that nature. So for that coach to come and talk to me and say, hey, this is what we need out of you, it really challenged me. And then when I transferred to Freed-Hardeman, it was the same way. I remember when I came in, a player pulled me aside that had been here for a few years and he's, had a conversation with me and just talked to me about, hey, if you're going to be the ace, then you've got to be the ace. And that doesn't just mean you pitch game one on Friday. That means that you take a leadership role and you make sure that when you're out there working hard, then you're pulling everybody else with you and you're pushing if you have to, and you're picking them up off the ground. And it's not just about you. It's about you are kind of in charge of this entire group of people. So I had some coaches and players that showed me that, hey, a lot of times people aren't thinking about being a leader until they're really challenged to do it and they're given the opportunity. And I talked a few years ago at the Freed-Hardeman lectureships about the power of an intentional leader. And we looked at Timothy and Titus and just how Paul worked with those individuals.
Mentored them,
He was mentor to them and he educated them on what they needed to do, but he also empowered them. And that's a big part of leadership is we want to try to teach these players and educate them on how to be a leader, but then you have to empower them a little bit to go out and do that and let them have some freedom within the team and have some of those conversations. And they're not always going to go right. Just like when I was a coach at Harris Stowe, all the conversations I had weren't the right conversations. You have to have those conversations, and sometimes they go well and sometimes they don't, but you grow and you get better. So empowering these young upcoming leaders to make decisions and to make mistakes and not jumping all over them, but, just continuing to encourage them is kind of that process. So I'd say being intentional about it, trying to educate them, try to empower them, try to encourage them would kind of be the way that I would approach that.
Yeah. And we're thinking too about a lot of times culture. We mentioned this earlier about certain teams have certain cultures. I think just as a whole in the country that we live in, we're very much a lot of times about ourselves. And so that doesn't always coincide with the team mentality. A lot of times, especially here in the United States, we're very much an individualistic culture if you look at us as a whole. And so these outside influences, I guess, play a big role in the way that players see themselves, their abilities, maybe their leadership abilities. So how do these external factors such as culture, society, maybe even their family background? I know with you coaching baseball, you had a lot of players from very diverse backgrounds. Maybe it's someone from another country, someone from a different part of the United States. You had players from all around. How do you kind of navigate these challenges of dealing with so many different kinds of people with different backgrounds and cultural influences? How do you deal with that?
Well, it's getting even harder because you said, hey, we tend to be selfish, and that's exactly. And I think even in athletics, it's becoming worse when you look at all the things that are going on with the money
Yeah.
and the transferring and all that. The culture is very much what is best for me. And you even see it from a lot of coaches, going from one place to another, and fans get upset about that. And you hear a lot of quotes, like, I got to do what's best for me. And
I got to get mine.
I gotta get what I deserve or what I need or what's best for my family. And to a certain degree, that's correct. You do need to do a lot of times what's best for your family, but trying to get that me out and try to make it more about we is a huge, huge thing and a task that coaches are trying to do, because so many people they're concerned about their scholarship, or they're concerned about their playing time, or they're concerned about how they're perceived by everybody else. And they have all of these outside voices, their parents, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their teammates, just all these outside voices that are telling them exactly how they need to be treated, or how much time they should be playing, and things of that nature. So everybody gets to make choices. It doesn't matter the circumstances that we go through in life. You get to make choices how you're going to react to that. And part of trying to set that culture within your program is trying to make it about we and what's best for this team, and trying to get those individuals to elevate their teammates and try to make their teammates better, and focus more on their teammates and the team than focus on themselves. And, everybody has different ways that they try to do that. And we tried to make it a program, make the culture of the program where the 40th guy on the team was just as valuable as the first guy on the team, and treat them the same way. They get the same exact stuff. They get the same gear. They get the same amount of time spent with them. It's not like a situation where we're going to take our starters and they get to take BP for 30 minutes and everybody that's not playing has to go, do something else while I'm working with the good players,
Right.
So we want to try to invest in every single person and just elevate the roles that those players that may not get playing time, that may not get the notoriety. We try to elevate the things they're doing. I had a roommate at Freed-Hardeman, Adam Patterson, who he was one of those guys that didn't get playing time. He didn't get a lot of playing time, but he was the best teammate. He pushed me. He pushed his other teammates. He was so valuable to our team, and he never got on the field. Because of the influence that he was. And so trying to elevate that guy and try to make them understand that what they're doing is important. It's important for a coach to articulate that to them and tell them, say, hey, I know you want to be out there on the field, but I really appreciate what you're doing, because you're making everybody else better in the program. So you really gotta accentuate the things that everybody's doing positively, and not just who's scoring 20 a game and who's hitting, all the home runs. It's every single person on the team. And when you have that culture that we is important and it's more important than me, you start to understand that, hey, the decisions that I make, they impact everybody. And I want to make sure that I'm making good decisions, not only for me, but also for this entire team. I heard somebody say, you're not just letting yourself down, you're letting your teammates down when you make a bad decision, or when you decide to skip class or do something on the weekend that you shouldn't be doing. It impacts everybody. And so trying to get young people to think that way, I think, is very, very important, and it's getting more and more difficult, it seems like, because of, you mentioned society and culture. That's not what we're seeing on, social media and things of that nature.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word investing in players. I really like how you mentioned that, how investing in the best player on the team and the one that maybe doesn't play. I really like that. I think that's really good. It kind of speaks to this idea of sustainability. So one of the things with character, you're hoping to reach them as a player and as an athlete on your team, but the overall goal, probably if you ask any coach, is they can take that with them after they're even done with you and carry that on to their life, if they're in a job or if they play professionally or whatever it is that they do. You want that to be something that doesn't stop at the school that they're at. You want that to carry on. So what are some things maybe that you've done, or maybe some things that you've seen that has helped you as a coach and as an athletic director to ensure that it doesn't just stop at Freed-Hardeman, that they're able to take these character development, these different skills they've learned, not just on the field, but off the field, and carry that on to their future things that they do, whether it's a job or who they interact with in the future?
Well, you mentioned the very beginning, just, the quotes sometimes, the stories. I think that that's really important to you define the principles and the characteristics that you want within your program, the culture that you want to be known as, and then you have to reinforce that every single day. And the way that I love doing that is like you mentioned, quotes, stories, things that just the terminology that we use within our program. I mean, a lot of the things that I say, concentrate on the process, not the results. Thoughts become things. Excellence over perfection. These little catchphrases and things that I would talk about all the time, and the stories that I would tell, it would be really cool for me when a player would graduate and then 6 months down the road or 3 years down the road, they would send me a text and say, "Hey, coach, I just got a new job, and I was going through my manual at work, and it was telling the same story that you told at practice," and it made me think about that. And I did another podcast 3 or 4 months ago with one of our former players, and he kept on bringing up things that I talked about. He played for me in 2010, 2011, and the stuff that he was talking about, controlled the process, things of that nature. It's the same stuff I was talking about in 2022. So having some consistency with what your message is, and then just continually talk about that, tell stories, introduce people that are basically saying the same message. You want to just continually pile on those thoughts. And even if they don't, that the guy did the podcast, he said, we all just thought that, Coach Estes is crazy. He's just silly guy, telling all these stories. Then all of a sudden he's, a 35-year-old adult now, 30-year-old adult. And he's like, that's exactly what I needed to hear.
Coach Estes's thoughts of wisdom grow with you over time, is what you're saying. Yeah. And, it's kind of nice to see where that sticks, right? Because sometimes when you're in the middle of something, you don't know, am I really getting across to these players? Then when you hear that reinforcement from them years later, I'm sure that's great to hear. Kind of leads me into the final thing I wanted to ask you. I'll try to end with this because it kind of brings it a little bit more personal. But you mentioned at the beginning talking about players that came to you as a player just from different backgrounds, maybe sometimes not the best of situations, and you saw them transform maybe into a leader, maybe into a player that you didn't necessarily know if they were going to be, but they worked hard and all that. Do you have a particular story that kind of comes to mind, personal story, whether it's from a player or just from an experience you had recruiting or whatever it is, where maybe the coaching or just the influence that the team had on a player transformed their character in a significant way? Do you have any certain example that comes to mind with that?
It would be hard to point out one. There's just so many. There's so many kids that and things that I think about right now. One of the things that's really cool is to see all the players that I've coached that are now coaches. Even Coach Trask, that's the head coach now at Freed-Hardeman, is a guy that was a assistant coach for me, and J.D. Flowers before him, who went down to Alabama, was a head coach, and all the players that are high school coaches. Corey Russell was a graduate assistant that he's a head coach down at junior college in Texas now, and guy at Alabama, Mississippi Valley State, that's the head coach down there, played for me at Harris Stowe, and he's a Division I head coach. So all these players that I've had an opportunity to impact that now are going off and coaching, and I'll get an email or a text message or whatever the case might be, and they, "Hey, coach, can you share with me that chart that we used to do?" Or, "Hey, tell me more about what we used to do." And I see them taking those things, but those are really cool stories. And the ones that I think about that really mean the most are, a lot of times there's players where you just don't think they're going to make it.
Yeah.
And they're struggling. I can think of 2 or 3. Bo Cavanis, was a guy that
a great player.
Great. I mean, we just inducted him to the Hall of Fame this fall, and he's just killing it in physical therapy and just having a great career. He's a great Christian husband, and but there was a period of time where he was playing as like, man, this guy, like, we're just butting heads all the time, and it's a struggle. But he overcame those things. I think about in the World Series in 2018, the year that we went to the World Series. Early in the year, we had 3 really good outfielders, and Darcy Moore, who was a senior that year from Canada.
Yeah.
He had been a starter his sophomore and junior year, and he was just kind of getting squeezed out of playing time his senior year. And we had some really tough conversations as the year went on, and and he stuck with it and came through, that situation. And I'll never forget the night before the championship game we're playing against Southeastern. I was dropping everybody off after dinner, and he stayed on the bus when everybody got off, and I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. And he said, "Hey, Coach," he said, "I want to play tomorrow, but I understand if I'm not in the lineup." Because we had Wes Brooks, who was should have been an All-American that year, and DeMichael Holmes, who was outstanding, and Kaimana Ancog from Hawaii was our center fielder. We had 3 really good outfielders, and Darcy had a great year that year. He hit 5 home runs and a doubleheader one time that year. But anyway, I just think about those where there were struggles, and it was tough, those nights that as a coach you go back and you lay your head down on the pillow and you're like, man, what a rough day, what a tough day. But then at the end of the year, you see the growth, or at the end of a career, or 5 years later, you see, wow, that was worth the struggle. And so many examples that we could talk about, but it's really, it's a really positive impact that you can have on people, and then they go out and have it on other people. And that's really what we're trying to do is try to help them, to empower them to go out and make a difference in other people's lives as well, and try to keep that seed getting planted in other people.
Yeah. You're making me have a stroll down memory lane here. That's when I was SID, when I went to the World Series. And I remember all those players that you mentioned, knew them pretty well just from my time as sports information director. And one of the things I always appreciated and why I wanted to have you on today was just my interaction with you when I worked with you in the athletic department. I always thought there was definitely an emphasis on not just the wins and losses, but on champions of character. Of course, I didn't mention this before, but you had a kind of instrumental role in being the contact person in our department, and definitely are now as athletic director, but even as a coach, on emphasizing the core values of the NAIA. I remember before COVID, I don't know if there was a lot was able to be done after COVID, went into the local school system, read to the kids, just always thought that was a cool experience to be able to report on that as a sports information director, kind of focusing on, again, the team mentality, but also focusing on others before ourselves. And that's one of the things that your teams always did a great job of in the community with the local school systems. Of course, your wife works here at Freed-Hardeman with a lot of education majors too, so that's always a good connection there as well. So I just always appreciated that about you. I just wanted to let you know that, and thought you'd be a great one to come on the program today, talk about character through coaching. And so I really appreciate you coming on today.
Oh, shucks, man.
There you go. I'm being so nice.
You're making me blush over here. But no, I really, when I had kids, I've got 3 kids, I mentioned them earlier, and my oldest one's getting ready to graduate from high school this year, and he's going to come to Freed-Hardeman and play baseball, and we're excited about that. But when those guys got into elementary school, it was really an eye opener for me, and I said, you know what, I want these people to have positive people in their life that they can look up to,
right.
And so we've got an opportunity with athletes, with, like you said, my wife, with her education students. We got an opportunity to try to do some things where we can try to impact people. And you talked about, back when you're SID and those things, it was interesting when I stopped focusing on winning so much and started focusing on trying to build the right types of people. We started winning more.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny how the chicken, what comes first, but
yeah.
building good people came before winning, and the emphasis, kind of changed, and it's interesting how that works sometimes, and you see that in really successful programs a lot of times, where you see how good their culture is, and all the things that we've talked about today, how they focus on those things, and they're really successful as a result of it. I like telling the story of Kevin Garnett, who they did a study one year in the NBA, and he led the NBA in high fives.
He was encouraging everyone.
He was and he was the MVP that year.
Yeah.
And the Boston Celtics won the NBA championship, and they gave the most high fives out of everybody, and I like to tell that story because it just goes to show. I like watching basketball games where somebody will miss a free throw and everybody goes up and gives them pats them on the tail or whatever the case might be, or they'll throw a ball out of bounds and everybody will go up and touch them. And you can see that the coach has coached that. It's like, hey, they're feeling bad about themselves right now.
Go encourage them.
Go encourage them.
Right.
And so, just seeing those things and trying to implement those and make that the culture of your program was something that was important to me, because that's what I wanted my kids. I wanted my kids to see that, and I wanted my kids to live that. And so, maybe it started out a little bit as a selfish reason because I wanted to try to impact my kids, but it grew to, hey, we've got an opportunity to impact people across our community. We've got an opportunity to impact people that we go and travel and hotels and restaurants and just everybody that we interact, umpires and things of that nature. We have an opportunity to impact a lot of people, and let's try to embrace that and do it. And I was proud of our guys really embracing that and becoming, as you mentioned, champions of character, and that's what the NAI calls it. But just throughout life, being people that are high character and high moral principles, and that be who were characterized by not what our batting average was or how many points we averaged, but was this person a great person? Were they trustworthy? Were they a hard worker? Were they a great teammate? Did they love me? Those are things that I think that any person that played sports 20 years ago will go back and talk about with their teammates. They won't, be like, hey, you remember when I hit 350? They'll tell the stories about,
road trips and
bus rides and just how they loved each other, so.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been great. And next week, we'll have another coach from the athletic department. Drew Stutz will be coming on talking about teamwork. So we'll do that the next episode. But thanks for joining us this week for the Playing with a Purpose podcast. Be sure to check out this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also listen to the Playing with a Purpose podcast on the Ministry League Podcast Network and on the FHU Athletics website, the Champions of Character page at gofhulions.com/champions of character. And remember, the strongest athletes aren't just built on the field. They are forged in the lessons they learn along the way. We'll see you next week on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.